They thought she was the weakest link. On a mission gone wrong when chaos erupted, her unit made the brutal call: abandon her in enemy territory. To them, she was a liability, a sacrifice to save the rest. But the enemy made one mistake. They underestimated the woman they thought was finished. Hours later, as dawn broke, the radios crackled with shocking news. The enemy generals were dead, and the one they left behind was still alive. The desert night was merciless, the kind of darkness that pressed on your skin, heavy and suffocating, broken only by the faint red glow of the convoy's taillights as it crawled across the barren expanse. She sat in the rear truck, headset on, fingers tapping lightly against the radio receiver strapped to her chest. Every breath came slow, steady, trained to blend into the silence of static. She was more than just a soldier. She was the ears of the unit, the one who could hear the whispers of enemies long before bullets started flying. But to her squad, she was something else entirely, a burden, a liability. "Why the hell is she even here?" one of the men muttered as he adjusted his rifle. He didn't even bother lowering his voice. "She slows us down. Can't even carry half the load," another scoffed. "Command only kept her because she's useful with wires and radios." Their laughter was sharp, cutting through the darkness. She didn't answer. She never did. Words were wasted on proving herself. In this unit, the only language anyone respected was action, and action was about to come. At first, it was just a flicker, a faint distortion bleeding through her headset. She sat upright, pulse quickening. Enemy chatter, close, too close. She leaned forward, urgency in her voice. "Stop the convoy," she said. "No one moved. Stop the convoy now," she repeated louder. The squad leader glanced back at her, irritation etched across his face. "This isn't your call." "Sit down!" She tore the headset off, frustration boiling over. "They're waiting for us." An ambush ahead, the explosion cut her short. The lead truck erupted in fire, the shockwave slamming into the convoy like a giant's fist. Tires screeched. Metal screamed. In seconds, the night was alive with chaos. Gunfire tore through the air as muzzle flashes lit the dunes. Enemy fighters poured from the ridgelines like shadows with teeth. Her instincts took over. She hit the dirt, rolling behind the wreckage, headset already back in place. Enemy voices screamed across her frequency, orders overlapping in a frantic rhythm. She heard their positions, their numbers, their plan. "Flank from the east ridge. Cut off the rear truck." She keyed into the squad's channel. "They're moving east, preparing to flank. Shut her up." Someone barked over comms, her stomach twisted. Not the enemy. Her own squad. Through the smoke and fire, she saw them regrouping, not toward her, but away. Trucks reversing, tires kicking up sand, engines howling in retreat. For a heartbeat, she thought it was strategy. A reposition, a feint. Then reality hit. They weren't coming back. "Wait!" she screamed into the radio, voice raw. "I'm still here. You can't leave me!" No response, only static. And then, the gutting truth. She heard their channel click off. Abandoned. Her heart pounded in her chest as the last set of taillights vanished into the night, swallowed by dunes and distance. She was alone, a single silhouette against an army of enemies. The fighters closed in, rifles raised, shouting to each other in a language she half understood. But she wasn't paralyzed. She wasn't broken. Her fear sharpened into something else, something dangerous. They thought she was prey. But prey doesn't listen to the hunter's heartbeat. And she did. Crouching behind burning metal, she tuned back into their chatter. Every step, every order, every shift in formation bled into her headset. She wasn't just hearing them, she was inside their minds. A burst of gunfire ripped overhead, forcing her lower. Sweat streaked her face as the firelight flickered across her eyes. Her squad had left her to die, but if this desert wanted her grave, it was going to earn it. Her lips curled into the faintest trace of a smile. "They'll regret not finishing me themselves," she whispered. And with that, the hunt began. The desert was merciless after the fire died down. Smoke from the wreckage drifted into the night sky, vanishing into an endless sea of stars. Silence returned, broken only by the distant growl of engines, the retreating convoy that had left her behind. She pressed her back against the burning carcass of the truck, chest heaving, headset still alive with enemy chatter. Her squad might have abandoned her, but the battlefield hadn't. And in that silence, she realized something chilling. She could hear everything. The enemy's frequency wasn't secure. Their confidence had made them sloppy. Orders, coordinates, laughter, it all spilled into her ears. And as much as her heart wanted to rage at the betrayal, her mind shifted into survival mode. "They think I'm trapped," she muttered under her breath. Good. Her first challenge wasn't the fighters closing in, it was the desert itself. Sandstorms brewed like living things, clawing at her skin, filling her lungs with grit. Heat would kill her by day, cold by night. She needed water, cover, and distance. Fast. She crawled from the wreckage, ducking low as enemy searchlights swept across the dunes. Her hand found a half-crushed canteen among the debris. Luck or fate. Either way, she wasn't about to waste it. The first night was a blur of movement. She stayed low, following the rhythm of enemy patrols she tracked through their own radios. Every word they spoke betrayed their blindness. She wasn't running from them. She was weaving through them. Hours later, exhaustion clawed at her muscles. She slid into a shallow ravine, pulling a tattered scarf over her head to block the moonlight. For the first time, she let herself breathe. Her squad's betrayal replayed in her mind like a broken film reel. Liability. Too fragile. Not worth the risk. Her jaw tightened. If they thought leaving her behind would erase her, they didn't know her at all. The sound of boots crunching sand snapped her back. Patrol. 4 men. She pressed herself into the ravine's shadow, headset alive with their chatter. Check the wreck. She couldn't have gone far. Command wants her alive. Bring her in breathing. A pause. Then laughter. Alive or broken doesn't matter. Her pulse slowed. The fear that had once owned her had turned into something sharper. Patience. She waited until the first soldier's silhouette crossed above her, rifle hanging carelessly at his side. Then she moved. Silent as the sand shifting, she rose behind him, arms snapping around his neck. A quick twist. His body dropped without a sound. The others froze at the thud. What was that? Check it. Too late. She grabbed his rifle, sighted through the dark, and squeezed the trigger. 2 flashes. 2 enemies down. The 4th shouted, spinning wildly, firing into shadows. She slid behind him, cold steel pressing against his temple. "Tell your commanders," she whispered in his ear, voice steady as stone. "Ghosts don't die in deserts." The shot echoed once more, then silence. 4 men gone. She crouched, stripping their packs for supplies. Water, ammo, a map. As she worked, her reflection caught in the shine of a rifle's scope. Dust smeared across her face, eyes blazing with something unrecognizable even to herself. She wasn't just surviving, she was becoming something else. By dawn, the desert stretched endless before her. Behind her, patrols would find their comrades' bodies and realize the truth. The woman they thought was prey had become the predator. Her squad had abandoned her. The enemy had underestimated her. Both had made the same mistake, and she intended to make them pay for it. By the second night, the desert was no longer silent. Enemy chatter crackled constantly through her headset, louder and sharper than before. They had discovered the 4 bodies. Panic hummed beneath their voices like static. "Search every dune. She's not far. Command says bring her alive. No excuses." She crouched atop a jagged ridge, the stars burning cold above her. From here she could see their patrols fanning out, flashlights darting like fireflies in the dark. They moved like hunters, but to her, they were prey too loud, too clumsy, too sure of themselves. Her lips curled into the faintest smile. She had their map now. Their supply routes, their checkpoints, the very lifelines of their desert operations, all glowing in her mind like veins under skin, and she had one advantage they didn't: patience. The first strike came before dawn. She'd found a fuel truck idling by an outpost, soldiers smoking nearby, laughing about the lost girl. She waited, rifle steady, heartbeat calm. One shot, and the driver slumped over the wheel. Another, The guard dropped his cigarette, flame meeting spilled fuel. The explosion tore across the dunes, a thunderclap of fire that lit the night like sunrise. Men shouted, scrambled, fired into the empty dark, but she was already gone. By morning, enemy radios hissed with tension. She destroyed the truck. How? Find her! She's one person. Then why do 10 men keep vanishing whenever she appears? Fear had a voice now, and it carried her name. For days, she struck like a phantom. A sniper shot from a mile away during a patrol. A claymore she'd rigged with scavenged wires and shrapnel, shredding a convoy. Supplies vanishing in the night. Each act more precise, more deliberate. She never stayed in one place. Never left tracks. Only bodies, only echoes. By the third day, whispers on the enemy channel shifted. She's not human. She moves like a shadow. She's the ghost of the desert. The nickname stuck. Ghost. She hadn't chosen it. But as she crouched in the ruins of an abandoned village, listening to their fear, she accepted it. If her own people had abandoned her, she would forge a new identity out here. Not liability. Not forgotten. Ghost. The enemy commander grew desperate. Enough! Set a trap. Broadcast her name. Draw her out! So they did. That night, her headset hissed with a chilling sound. Her own name, spoken in their tongue, repeated, taunting, daring her to come closer. For a moment, her blood froze. To hear her name, her true name, on the open channel dripping with mockery, was something different. They knew her now. They wanted her alive, but fear had blinded them. They thought they were luring her. In reality, they had marked themselves. She moved before the sun rose, slipped past their bait patrols, climbed the cliffs overlooking their command tent. The glow of lanterns swayed inside, shadows of officers bending over maps. Her rifle rested on the rocks. She slowed her breathing, tuned out everything but the rhythm of her own pulse. One shot cracked the dawn. The lead officer crumpled, his blood staining the maps. Screams erupted. Chaos tore through the camp as soldiers scrambled to cover, shouting her name like it was a curse. She melted back into the desert, already gone. By now, her story spread faster than any bullet. Not just among enemies, but across every frequency. Even her old squad had to hear it. The soldier they'd called a liability had become the ghost, haunting their enemies every step. She didn't care if they believed it. What mattered was the shift in tone when her name crossed the airwaves. No longer dismissed, no longer pitied. Now it was spoken with fear. The desert had swallowed her once. But she had crawled out of its jaws transformed, not broken, not abandoned, but unstoppable. And this was only the beginning. News travels strange and fast in war. Where once radios carried only orders, now they carried whispers. Maps burned black with doubt, commanders arguing over ghosts and failures. The enemy's confidence had cracked. Every plan reeked of paranoia. That crack was all she needed. She had become more than a nuisance. She had become a vector. Kill the lieutenants, cut the couriers, sabotage the supply lines. Do enough of that, and the general's plans would rot from the inside. She didn't need to kill every soldier. She needed to kill their certainty. Her first target was tactical rather than theatrical. A courier hub tucked into a dry wadi where messengers met at dusk. She watched it for days from a rim of broken rock, learning the rhythm of footsteps, the cadence of voices, the time a single lantern always guttered. When the little market emptied and the moon hung low, she crawled like water. A single shot. The courier's lamp winked out. Confusion bloomed like a bruise. She slipped down into the wadi, moved through tents and silk tarps, taking radios and documents by hand. Men sprinted past, searching, rifles swinging. She melted away with a satchel of orders and a map folded like a confession. Back in the shadows, she unrolled their treasure. Routes to supply depots. Encrypted codes that, once replayed with a little sabotage, would send a battalion into the wrong valley. She smiled and began to rewrite the script. Her next play was a fabrication so simple it was brutal. Fake orders, placed carefully back on the channel as if from command. She used their own accents where she could mimic, slipped in timestamps, let a false rendezvous simmer. Within hours, a truck convoy peeled off course and drove directly into an exposed shelf of rock where she had buried a line of charges. The blast closed the road. Supplies burned. Morale frayed. Then came the men who thought themselves untouchable, the colonels and brigadiers who moved under a cloak of guards and arrogance. They were careful, yes, but arrogance makes men predictable. They slept in secured compounds, ate the same meals, and trusted the same little comforts: a certain brand of tea, a favored sleeping tent, a habitual route to the latrine. She catalogued these comforts like a detective catalogues clues. She struck at night, surgical and cold. One colonel's tent snuffed out in a whisper when fire wrapped itself around his bedding. Another fell in a corridor with the metallic bite of a blade to the neck, silent as a promise. When a brigadier attempted to flee, she had rigged the gate to lock and then burned the trucks behind him. Panic is disorienting. Panic is a tool. Each death pulled at a string. Each sabotaged radio call propagated confusion up the ladder. Units that had once moved with lethal efficiency now argued over who would lead, how to secure routes, whether to trust intercepted commands. Commanders who once barked orders at a distant front were forced to split their attention, second-guessing even the simplest move. Her tactics didn't rely on spectacle, though the occasional explosion was monstrous enough to be remembered, but on eroding trust. She replaced certainty with doubt and doubt with paralysis. A general who cannot trust his lieutenants is a general who cannot wage war. Word of these turnovers reached the general's private channel, and for the first time they spoke with the tremor of men who might be hunted inside their own beds. They convened councils behind steel doors, rotating locations, changing handwriting, trusting fewer and fewer faces. Their paranoia made them slower. Their slowness became a vulnerability. She used that vulnerability. By now her moves were a blur to those who tried to pin her. She would strike a small supply convoy at dawn, then be 2 valleys away directing a fake ambush over communications. By midday, an entire battalion would be chasing ghosts. She never lingered. She hid in ruined shepherd huts, in the carcass of burned-out tanks, in the bellies of caves where even the wind feared to go. Then came the signal that broke something deeper than supply lines: betrayal within their own inner circle. An intercepted conversation revealed a general's aide arranging a hush deal with an outside contractor, safe passage for officers in exchange for gold. The aide thought himself clever, thinking he could sell salvation and pocket the rest. He wasn't clever enough to disguise his voice pattern from someone who lived in their frequencies. She turned that greed into an executioner's trap. The aide met a courier in a canyon, thinking the exchange private. She hid above, watched the shadows swallow the deal, and when the courier's satchel opened, light spilled, but not money. Elsewhere, charges blew the dealer's getaway, and the aide's wrists felt the cold of rope and the whisper of justice. He confessed under pressure, fingers shaking as he named others. Their network began to unspool. With the aide's names, she struck at the soft underbelly. Logistics officers, communication chiefs, the men who tied the general's arms together. The enemy hierarchy bled from small cuts now. Rumor became a contagion, and contagions kill more than bullets when they reach the mind. Through it all, she kept a single rule: minimize collateral. The desert had enough ghosts. She would not make needless ones. Her war was against the machinery of command, against the arrogance that had abandoned her. She had not become a murderer. She had become an instrument of balance. By the time the first generals began to whisper of relocating their councils beyond the mountains, the network they'd built to control the region was splintered. Supplies misrouted, lieutenants mistrusted, couriers vanished. The men who had once ordered columns of troops now quarreled over who would answer a radio. They amassed forces to hunt her, and in doing so, they sent their best into confusion. She watched one morning from a ridge as 3 armored units slid past a canyon, only to find a collapsed bridge and men stuck in mud and metal. They fired wildly, then radioed in for orders that led them deeper into misdirection. The generals watched on screens and cursed into pillows. They could not imagine the woman in the dust between their lines, calm and precise, listening to their panic like a symphony. The reckoning was not yet total. It would require more. An attack not of whispers, but of fire, a blow that would cut the head from the serpent. But the foundation was laid. Command had been hollowed from within, and the battlefield's pulse was hers to read. She flexed her fingers and thumbed the radio with a soft, almost amused sigh. The desert had taught her how to wait. The generals were learning how to fear, and those two lessons together made her unstoppable. The generals had retreated into a fortress carved from stone and arrogance. High walls, machine gun nests, a maze of checkpoints and towers bristling with antennas. To the world, it looked impenetrable, the seat of command for an army that still thought it could control the desert. To her, it looked like a cage waiting to be locked from the outside. From the ridge where she lay hidden, she studied every detail. Trucks arrived twice a day. Patrols rotated at predictable intervals. The north wall was new concrete, unscarred but poorly cured, weaker than the rest. Beneath it, a storm drain, narrow, rusted, but large enough for a determined fighter to crawl through. Patience had brought her this far. Precision would take her further. She began at night, moving like smoke through the outer villages. One by one, she cut the fortress off from its lifelines. Supply convoys disappeared in fire. Water trucks overturned into ravines. Radio relays sparked and died in sudden bursts of static. Each disruption tightened the fortress's isolation, each cut a wire from the web. Inside, paranoia swelled. Her headset hissed with the general's fury. "Where are our supplies? Why haven't reinforcements arrived? Is this sabotage, or is she truly inside our ranks?" She let their fear ferment. She wanted them restless, sleepless, doubting the men beside them. Only then did she make her move. The storm drain was barely wide enough for her shoulders, lined with slime and rust. She slid on her stomach through the dark, inch by inch, each scrape of metal echoing in her bones. Rats skittered past her face. Claustrophobia clawed at her lungs, but she gritted her teeth and pressed forward. Finally, she emerged inside the compound, in the shadow of a fuel depot. Fortune or fate? She waited until dawn, hiding in the skeleton of old pipes. When the first guards passed, joking about the phantom woman, she planted her first charges. One on the depot's pump, another under a line of parked trucks. A silent chain of fire waiting for her signal. Then she moved deeper. Inside the stronghold, life carried a brittle tension. Officers barked orders too loudly. Soldiers stared into corners too long. And always, on the radios, her name echoed like a prayer and a curse. She stalked them quietly, slipping through shadows, memorizing the rhythm of their boots. She sabotaged cameras, cut wires, stole a guard's keycard as he dozed. Every move was deliberate, part of a greater storm building in her mind. At last, she reached the inner courtyard. Across it loomed the command hall, a square of stone and steel where the generals huddled behind maps and guards. Lights burned through its windows, silhouettes pacing like anxious ghosts. Her heart slowed. This was the moment, the culmination of every crawl through dust, every night spent cold and alone, every whisper of liability that had haunted her. She set her rifle against the wall, breathed steady, and waited. The signal came with sunrise. A convoy of armored cars rolled toward the gate. Reinforcements finally, the generals believed. She smiled grimly, because she had already intercepted their coordinates. The convoy never arrived. Instead, she pressed the detonator. The fuel depot erupted behind her in a thunderclap of fire. Trucks ignited one by one, a chain reaction that shook the walls of the fortress. Soldiers screamed, scrambled, firing wildly into the smoke. Sirens wailed. Chaos bloomed like a flower of flame. Amid the panic, she moved. Through the confusion, across the courtyard, past men blinded by smoke. She was no longer a ghost. She was fire itself. She breached the command hall just as the generals shouted into dead radios, demanding answers that would never come. Guards turned, rifles rising, but too slow. She was already inside their circle, rifle barking, precision sharp as a scalpel. Two fell. A third tried to raise his pistol. She dropped him before he drew breath. The last general stumbled back, face pale, hands trembling. "You," he whispered, voice broken. "You're not even supposed to be here." Her eyes narrowed, steady as the horizon. That's what they all thought. The final shot cracked, silencing him forever. Outside, the fortress burned. Antennas collapsed in showers of sparks. Ammunition stores cooked off, sending plumes of fire into the sky. Soldiers fled in every direction, leaderless, shattered. What had been a symbol of power was now nothing more than smoke on the wind. She stood in the courtyard, rifle still warm in her hands, and listened. For the first time, the enemy channels were silent. No orders, no laughter, no taunts, only the static of a broken command. She exhaled slowly. It wasn't triumph she felt, not exactly. It was something colder, heavier. The knowledge that she had changed the war alone, that she had turned abandonment into reckoning, and that nothing, not even the desert itself, could erase what she had done here. The desert was quiet again, not the quiet of peace, but the stunned silence that follows a storm no one believed possible. Smoke still curled from the stronghold's ruins. Dunes glowed with the afterburn of fire. Radios across the region whispered only static. She stood alone in the courtyard where generals once commanded legions. Now only charred maps scattered in the wind, ink bleeding like the lifeblood of an empire. Her chest rose and fell steadily. She wasn't shaking anymore. The fear, the doubt, the echo of abandonment, all of it had burned away with the fortress. What remained was something forged, tempered in fire and betrayal, a soldier no more, a liability no longer, a ghost turned legend. She didn't stay to watch the fortress collapse. Legends don't linger for applause. She moved back into the desert before the sun climbed high. Footsteps light, rifle slung across her back, but word traveled faster than she ever could. Within hours, whispers spread through every village and checkpoint. The stronghold was gone, the generals dead. Not by a battalion, not by airstrikes, but by the very woman they had mocked and abandoned. Her old squad heard it first as rumor, then as confirmation. They said she didn't make it. They said she was left behind. Then how the hell is she tearing down fortresses? The men who had once called her a burden sat in silence, radios pressed tight, listening to the tale. Some refused to believe. Others stared at the ground, shame heavy on their shoulders. Because no matter how they spun it, the truth was clear. She had done what entire units couldn't. She had become indispensable. Meanwhile, among the enemy, her name became something different. Not just a ghost, not just a threat, but a warning. On the open channel, her name was spoken no longer with mockery, but with hesitation, like invoking a curse. Patrols froze when they thought they heard her voice on static. Convoys rerouted at the mere hint of her presence. Soldiers fired into shadows, convinced she was always one step away. Superstition filled the cracks of their discipline. Some swore she could walk through walls. Others said the desert itself hid her, protecting her as one of its own. And though she never corrected them, she knew the truth. She was flesh and blood, scarred and tired, but alive. Alive when she wasn't supposed to be. Alive when even her allies had written her off. Days turned into weeks. The war shifted. Without their generals, the enemy fractured. Command splintered into factions clawing at scraps of power. What had once been a well-oiled machine devolved into chaos. Every faction blamed the same figure. Every soldier feared the same shadow, her. It was only a matter of time before her own side reached out. Not the squad who left her. They didn't have that courage. It was higher, much higher. Generals across the line who had once skimmed her file and stamped liability now spoke her name with urgency. We need her insight. She knows their structure. She broke their chain of command. She can help us finish this. They offered extraction, medals, recognition. She listened in silence as the voice of command spilled through her headset. Formal and apologetic, promising to bring her home. A part of her longed for it, the warmth of comradeship, the comfort of being seen. But another part, the part tempered in the fire of betrayal, was not so quick to forgive. Home was no longer a place. It was the desert that had taught her patience, precision, and strength, so she didn't answer. Not yet. One night, as she sat atop a dune, wind sweeping the sands into endless waves, she heard laughter. Faint, distant, drifting on memory. Her squad's voices mocking her. Too fragile. Too slow. Liability. She let the word echo once more, then buried it deep. Because the enemy didn't call her that anymore. They called her the ghost of the desert, and her own people, even if they never said it aloud, knew the truth. She was the blade they had thrown away, only to find it sharper when it cut from the dark. Her legend grew beyond borders. Civilians whispered her story to children at night, turning her into myth. Fighters scrawled her call sign on walls as both threat and prayer. Some swore they'd seen her eyes glowing from dunes under moonlight. Others claimed she disappeared into sandstorms like smoke. But she knew legends weren't about truth. They were about what people needed to believe. And if they needed her as ghost, as myth, as fire, then so be it. She would carry that mantle. In the end, her transformation wasn't about vengeance. It wasn't about proving her squad wrong, or even about killing generals. It was about survival, and what survival makes of a person. The desert had stripped her to the core and rebuilt her in its own image, enduring, silent, relentless, and, though she still bore the scars of betrayal, they no longer defined her. What defined her was this: from liability to legend, from abandoned to indispensable, from forgotten name to whispered fear. Her story would outlive her, not written in medals, but in the fear of enemies and the awe of allies. And as she disappeared once more into the endless horizon, the radio static finally broke with a single voice, an enemy soldier, trembling, whispering into the dark. "She's out there. The ghost. God help us all."